Okay, in the first video, I got everything all set up. I got the model set up. I showed you where you can download Blender, how you can get to Hubs and its development environment, Spoke. And now I'm going to go through the mechanics of exporting the file out of Rhino, getting it into Hubs. So the first thing, what I want to do is I want to do this in two tranches. The first thing I want to do is I want to export just the kind of base that you're going to walk on, and you'll see why. And then I'll export everything else. Right? So I turned off all my other layers, and I'm going to type export, and just select the base here, and hit the space bar. Right? You navigate to the place where you're saving stuff, and the file type you want to save in is .obj. There are many 3D file formats. This is one that you can read in Blender, and Blender we're going to use to export the one that you can read in the Hubs or the Spoke import. So I'm going to call this demo base and say save. And the first thing is going to give me a bunch of options. You want to make sure polygon mesh objects is checked. Everything else should be normal. The other thing you might want to check on is map Rhino Z to object Y. That just has to do with the fact that different softwares, some softwares have left right is X, back and forth is Y, and up is Z, up and down is Z. And some softwares say back and forth, left right is X, back and forth is Z, and up down is Y. At the end of the day, if you're bringing things in from one software to another and you find out they are coming in sideways, look at that setting. So I'm going to say OK, right? The other thing is you get this slider about number of polygons. I'm just going to leave that alone for now. This geometry, it's all planes. Everything's fine. I'll talk about that when I export the other objects. So I'm going to say OK. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Blender. And you get a big confusing screen. Here's all you got to do. You get a cube in the middle, select it, and delete it. Hit delete. And then go to File, go to Import, and find our wavefront.obj. Navigate to the place where you saved your files. You can see that the OBJ actually, it exported two files. One is the geometry, the .obj itself, and the other is the materials. Make sure you click on the .obj, which is the geometry. It'll read the materials, and click Import. Right? And there's our base. We're not going to do anything to it. All we're going to do is now turn right around, and we're going to export it, and we're going to export it as a GLTF. Actually, what we want is a GLB. And all that is, right, again, we're going to navigate to the place where we're saving our files. And you should see, oh, I accidentally clicked on import. I'm like, why does this look weird? Let's try that again. We are going to export this as a GLTF, right? And navigate to the place where we save the files. Right here, you see the options for the export. Right. The thing that's critical is you want to make sure the format is GLTF binary, which is a .glb file. At the end of the day, all you need to know is that's the format that you can use in Spoke to import the model. And Rhino doesn't export it, but Blender does export it. The only thing here, again, change that format to .glb, which is a GLTF binary, and give it a name. And I call this demo base, and click export GLTF. All right, so now, right, when you go back to Spoke, I'm by default, I think, logged in. You'll create a login, and then you'll go to projects. And you'll create, you can see I practiced. You can create a new project, a new empty project. right? And this is the screen you get. By default, you get this lovely mountain scene. You can see that it's basically its own model, which is a GLD. You can select it over here in the hierarchy and just hit delete. And now we're left with this wonderful empty infinite vista. So down here, before we can just import the model, what you need to do is add it to your elements or your assets, and then you drag things from your assets into the scene. So if you click on my assets, right, I have a bunch of stuff. You'll see nothing. Let me delete these. Right, I'm just right-clicking to delete a bunch of stuff. You can see that this is not my first rodeo. Okay. So you'll have nothing here, and what you'll want to do is click Upload, navigate to the place where you saved, and click on your demo base.glb. Right. So when you import it, right, nothing appears in your screen. Now it's just in your assets here, and you can just drag it into your scene. Now it's going to drag it in some weird location. But if you select it over here, the easiest thing to do, you can see it's got position attributes. Just set them to be 0, 0, and 0. Right. Now we've got this weird grid. If you come up over here, we can turn that grid off. So this is going to be the thing that we walk on. And so what you want to do before you import anything else, right, in the hierarchy, there's this thing called floor plan, which determines what's the surface that you can walk on. Click on it and hit regenerate. And you can see that you now get this grid, this mesh, right, over your model that's talking about, what's a walkable surface. There's some other settings here that determine things like this maximum slope, that's the maximum slope you can walk up, and maximum step height. So if this half-meter height, right, that's going to determine if you can walk up that step. Right, so if that step is more than a half meter, you're not going to be able to just kind of navigate up it. So if you want to, you could up this, step height. But basically that's it, right? The other thing we may wish to change, right, is the spawn point. So if we select this little person here, that's going to determine where we sort of drop into the space. And up here are your move tools. So if you click right on that one, and you just move this arrow, we can change the spawn point to be over there. So now if we just say publish to hubs, right, and let's give it a name. Let's call it demo space 2, and save project, and say save and publish. Gives you a little performance check, publish scene, all right, and we can say view your scene. So in Hubs, the difference between a room and a scene is technically what we're creating. A room is like an instance of that where people can gather and you can give them the URL, and the scene is kind of like the wrapper. So I could create a room using the scene, and somebody else could create a room using the same scene, and they'd be different rooms, but they use the same kind of scene. So I'm going to create a room with the scene, and then, right, so enter the room, click through this stuff. Right, and you can see here we are, right, and we can walk around in our pretty empty space like we're on the deck of some existential aircraft carrier. Okay, so what we really want is we want our other objects here in the room with us, or in the scene. So to do that, I'm basically just going to go through the whole process again, right? I'm going to come back to Rhino, and this time I'm going to turn off my base layer. And here, you can import them all together, or export them all together. So I'm going to type export. I'll select these 4 objects. I'll hit the space bar. I'm going to call this demo objects. say OK. Right, polygon mesh object, those, if we set those right before, they should still be right. Say OK. Now you can see, just here's what this slider does, right? If I slide this down and I hit preview, right, you can see it shows how it's like meshing my curvy geometry. Like if I slide it all the way down and hit preview, you can see that these kind of shapes are getting pretty chunky. Conversely, if I slide it all the way up and hit preview, you can see they get very smooth. When you have more polygons, you create more geometry, you create a heavier file. For this simple scene, it really wouldn't matter, but if you have lots of geometry, it will start to matter. So ideally, you want to find the midpoint, of where you get enough smoothness so that it looks decent, but not so much so that it makes your scene really slow. Honestly, usually the default, which is in the middle, it's pretty good. So we'll leave it, and we'll just say OK. And now we're going to go back to Blender. And if you want, you could just hit that, and you could hit delete, or you could say, new, new file, and delete our cube again. Doesn't really matter. We're going to go back, and we are going to import our wavefront.obj from the place where we save things. This time we want our objects. We're making sure we click on the OBJ. There they are. You can see we got our sort of pale pink and our pistachio green. And again, we're going to say export this time, GLTF. Right? Make sure it's a GLTF binary, which is a .glb file. Navigate to the place where we save and call this demo objects, and click export. And then we'll go back to Spoke over here. And we need, again, to bring this into our assets. So I'm going to click Upload, bring in my objects, open. All right. So here are my objects. I can drag them to the scene, and it uploads. You can see they're in some kind of random location. So if now I just change their position also to be 0, 0, 0, you can see everything sort of lines up, and they're in their right location. And if I say publish to Hubs, it's going to save the project, save and publish. Everything looks good. Right? We can view our scene. Now when we turn around, here we have our nice kind of modernist Wally Harrison shapes in our carved landscape. And there you have it. There are a couple little things you could tweak, in Hubs if you feel like getting fancy. One of them that I think is worth doing is, we moved our spawn point to be over there. But it kind of bothers me that you come in looking in the wrong direction. Right, so if you click here on rotate and you set your increments to 1 degree, and you click this sort of green thing that'll like spin our little person around, you can see, I guess that's their nose. If we spin them around this way, now when we drop in, we should be, we should have a better view. Another thing is if you click on the skybox, right, the skybox will, you can start to play with the sort of lighting settings. Right, so you can sort of change the time of day and change the luminance and, you know, sort of where the horizon starts and ends. You know, if you feel like getting, you know, sort of really like fancy and existential, see, where is it, under elements, you can, you know, you can look around here and you can find simple water, and you could bring it into your scene. You could, let's see, scale it up, and let's move it. All right, so now our you know, our environment is sort of, you know, floating on this small ocean. We could also change the color of it so that it's, I don't know, something a bit more fun. You know, and you know, and there you go. You click publish, publish the scene, say OK. Oops. If you can also always come here and say open in hubs, and we create a room at the scene. Like my internet's being a little bit slow for some reason. Hopefully that will open in a second. Well, this is embarrassing. Let's maybe try that again. Open in hubs. Create a room with the scene. There we go. You can see the lighting is still not quite right, but you know, we're not going to fuss this. Right. You know, you can see we pop in the right location. We've got a little bit of a flooding problem. Welcome to the 21st century. But here we are. So if you're looking to get a jump on what we're going to do on Thursday, you know, this is what we're going to do on Thursday. You know, you can use the first video to prepare your model. That would be great to show up with. But the rest, I'm gonna walk you through. So there you go.